tonight we've got a blockbuster meeting. We have 4 people here to tell us from various perspectives about how the local grand jury works, its role, and the power for citizens to take back their government through such a process. So will the 4 panelists please step forward?
I think we're all here.
All righty. Who can restore the country? Who can do it?
We the people.
We the people. She goes to the head of the class. We the people. We are waiting for a president to do the right thing and save the country. But I can tell you, he won't be able to do it. I don't care who it is, Trump or Cruz. Because if they get elected, and those are the 2 front-runner conservatives right now, if they get elected, they will be fought tooth and nail. So many people think the Tea Party's job will be over when we get a conservative elected. Absolutely not. We must get a conservative elected, and it will certainly make things a lot easier. But where the real problems are is right down here in the grassroots where we live. Nobody I know wants to serve on the grand jury. Do you know anybody who says, gee, I'd like to serve on the grand jury? Okay, well, boy, I tell you, you're the exception. You're the exception. But that's good news. All right, how many of you that raised your hand have ever been called to serve? None of us.
Not on the grand jury, just a regular.
Just Mike, just me.
Just Mike. Mike has been. Okay, David Conway. I'm talking about the local county grand jury.
Raise your hand.
Very few conservative good people seem to get there. Okay, David Mashburn?
Yeah, when I turned 70, I got a letter from the clerk of the Superior Court, said that I was exempted from jury or grand jury from now on because of my age. So I guess I don't know anything now that I'm 70.
Well,
That's offensive, isn't it? Because,
Hillary
yes.
Clinton is 70.
Exactly. So that's why we're here tonight, is to talk about the role and the power of the local grand juries. That's where we can get involved and make a difference. And tonight you're going to learn a little bit about what that role and power is. And you will be amazed at what we could do that we're not doing. And in fact, what we're hoping to do is hold a seminar training session in order to teach people what to do if you're called up. And then we're going to do a little nosing around with the district attorney and find out what that process is for selection. Because I'm surprised as many good people as I know that have never been called to serve. So we're going to do a little of that work too. But buckle your seatbelts. We've got a blockbuster meeting and we're ready to get started. All right. Well, we'll move right along and get started in our meeting. And I want to take just a minute to introduce our speakers. On my far right, why don't you stand, please? Ricardo Davis is the chairman for the Georgia Constitution Party, and we're glad to have you here with us tonight. Next to him is Mr. Mike Scupin, and he is a candidate for Congress right now. Which district?
9th District.
9th District, and who are you opposing?
Doug Collins.
Doug Collins. And you are running for all the reasons that we want you to. Tell us about it.
I'm running simply to say no. That's my goal, to go up there and just say, no, we've had enough. What you're trying to put in this omnibus bill, there's too much in there that doesn't fit the Constitution, therefore I can't vote for it. It's that simple. I'm a very simple man. The Constitution is very simple to read. We know what the government is charged with. All we have to do is look right here. It tells us, and nearly everything in the omnibus bill fails this test. Very few things.
He has a resume that will choke a horse, and he's very well qualified to speak to us. And he has done a lot of work on a particular book called the Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates. It's by Matthew Truella. You can get it online. You can read it in a couple of days. It's really worth your read, and we'll be putting that out on the wire so that you'll have that information and can get the book. But that's part of the foundation that tells us why we the people have the power and how we're not using it. So thank you, and he'll be opening for us in just a moment. Next to him is Mr. Micah Mead. And Mike comes to us from a very practical position. And I don't know what your degrees are, but I'm sure you got them. But I don't want to slight anybody here. I'm sure Ricardo has a few too. Mike was a grand jury foreman on the grand jury here in Cherokee County when the grand jury took up the very controversial case that we had been driving for several years on the Bobo Boondoggle. How many of you remember that? And that is still being played out. And there's some things that we will be making public before long on that same case. But Mike was the grand jury foreman, and you're going to tell us a little bit about your experience and how the district attorney intervenes in that process. And she has no place in that process. The grand jury is the people's process. So we'll look forward to hearing from you. Okay, and on the far end we have Judge Paul Nally. And what county is it you were a judge in? Is it Bartow?
Bartow.
He's from Bartow County, and he's an outspoken judge on the power of local grand juries and has been going around talking about it, stirring up tea parties to understand. And the first thing we have to do is get educated and know how to use our rights. And so we know we have them and we don't know how. So Judge will be speaking about that. We're going to get started with Mr. Mike Scupin first. So go ahead, Mike.
I want to start out by asking, just to see where we are and what kind of group we have. How many people in here heard Judge Nally when he spoke? Okay, how many were here when I spoke?
I'm judge.
Now, how many of you have shared what you heard from him or from me with your friends or neighbors? Fantastic. How many of you were received when you told them they could judge the law?
Shock is the response. Shock.
That's what I expected, because when I first discovered this, and that's the way I like to talk about it, because a few years back I was exceedingly ignorant. I'm still ignorant, but I'm not exceedingly ignorant anymore. When I found this out and began to tell people, they looked at me like I was literally a nut. And so what I started doing, I started carrying this little book here with me. I keep it in my briefcase nearly all the time. This is a copy of Georgia's Constitution, where it plainly states in here in Article 1, Paragraph 11, the jury shall be the judges of the law and the facts.
How many in this audience knows that? Okay, it's not enough. You see?
So
We're doing the right
you
thing.
can see right now with a few hands that came up, part of what the problem is in our nation. You know, you hear people all the time say, if you don't know your rights, how do you know if you're losing them? Well, this is one of our rights that we clearly have, but we've lost it, literally. It's still here, but if we don't exercise these rights, then they're gone. It's that simple. And this is so important of a concept to really get behind our little noggins, because coming to meetings is wonderful, because we do learn things. But if we don't use it and we don't share it, then we really wasted our time. So I want to impress upon you the need not just to come and learn, but as you hear things from these different panelists, share that with your neighbors, share it with your friends and your family. The word has got to spread. Our schools are not going to teach this, especially now that we've got Common Core. Believe me, this kind of stuff will never surface in a school that has Common Core. And the reason this is so important, sometimes when I give my personal testimony about my salvation experience, I like to use an example that someone showed me one time, and it's commonly used. They use Carl Walenda. Anybody remember Carl Walenda? got a few that do. I think it was back in the 70s, maybe, a long time ago, but he walked Tallulah Gorge on a tightrope. Well, the story that I heard to illustrate this point went something like this. Carl walks over to the crowd and he says, how many of you believe I can walk this tightrope? Yay, Carl, we believe you can do it. How many of you believe that I can push a wheelbarrow across this tightrope in the gorge? Yay, Carl, we believe you can do it. How many of you believe that I can push a man in the wheelbarrow across this tightrope and across the gorge? Yay, Carl, we know you can do it. Who wants to volunteer? It's the point where you volunteer is where you really believe anything. I don't care what it is, whether it's your salvation, whether it's the fact that you can judge the law. Until you take it and do something with it, you don't really believe it. Belief takes action. We've taught that in the book of James. You have got to move forward with what you know if you really believe it. And along with that concept comes, like she was speaking, the doctrine of the lesser magistrate. Now what that doctrine teaches, and it's all through the scripture, is that God's law preempts man's law. And anytime man's law says something or forces us into a situation that is against God's law, it's not only the duty, it's the obligation of those of us that are in elective office, as well as those of us that put them there, to stand against man's law when it violates God's law. So again, if you're not doing that, then you may not really believe that you should be standing for God's law. And I am seeing a lot of people in positions of power, both judges, legislators, governors, that show me by their actions that they think man's law is higher than God's law. We just watched our Supreme Court when they ruled against what God said marriage was. Now, has our governor or our state legislature stood up and said, no, God's law supersedes man's law? They have not.
And I want to add something to that. We have a state law that reaffirms marriage, traditional marriage. And the Supreme Court does not write law. They made a decision in that case only. So there was nothing wrong for our Attorney General to say, okay, that's interesting, that's how you're ruling. But in Georgia, we will uphold traditional marriage because it's the law of this state. And the law of the state is supreme. And the Supreme Court doesn't have the power over the state. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just like for people to remember Andrew Jackson when the Supreme Court ruled that he had to do something. I forget now exactly what the circumstance is. Somebody in here may recall what it was they had ruled on, but right now it's escaping me. But he said, okay, y'all made that ruling, let's see if you enforce it. I'm not going to.
Right.
That's nullification.
Excuse me, if I may,
Yes,
I've been
ma'am.
a registered nurse for 20 years, and our Senate Agricultural Committee just overrode Vermont's GMO labeling law. I've been studying the effects of GMOs on our health in the nation, and Monsanto, and that was very disturbing for me. I emailed and called all the members of the Senate Agricultural Committee, and they could have voted it down, and they actually passed it on. So that was quite disturbing, and for me personally, as a nurse and mother, it was
Yeah,
very
and we see this all the time, and we will continue to see this happen until you are pushing on those people so hard that they say, oh, is that the way it's got to be? And the way you push on them is when good men like this gentleman steps up to run against someone that we put up there that we see is not doing what he said. You got to get behind him. That's how you teach lessons to the other legislators. And until we start doing that, then we are going to continue down this same road. So again, the ball is in your court right now. You've got a man that has stepped up in this district down here now. What are you going to do? Are you going to go home and take the little card he handed and toss it in the garbage like most people do? Or are you gonna make a decision to go home and say, I have got to stand for principles? Congressman Loudermilk did not do what he said he was going to do. I want a man that will do that, and you put this gentleman in office. If he doesn't do it, then you do the same thing again. That, folks, is term limits, and that is term limits that work. This hypochondriac kind of term limits that people keep talking about, where you can only go up there and serve 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, I don't care what time period you choose. That's not term limits, and all that does is transfer power from the people to Congress. Because once you instill term limits on a congressman, it's just like the second term of a president who cares nothing about what the people do. Go and look at every single president that has been up there since term limits were introduced, and look and see what their second term looks like. It's terrible, every single one of them, including Reagan.
Yes.
So the main thing I want to drive home is this concept about judging the law, understanding God's law. We've got to get this in our hearts to the point that we are willing and ready to act on these things. Because until you're willing to stand up and act and actually do something about it, this country is going to continue down the same thing. Talking about it is not acting. I hate to break it to you, but it's not acting. So with that, I'll turn it over to somebody else unless y'all have some questions you would like to ask me.
All right, about how much time do we have?
She had 1 minute.
1 minute, do we have a question? Okay, if we don't, we'll move on. And Judge Nally, thank you, Mike.
Well, since I'm the least popular here tonight, well, he got more votes than I did. Ladies and gentlemen, all of you are here tonight with one common concern, and that is that you have seen, and with your own eyes you have heard with your own ears, those situations which make you uncomfortable as to the continued preservation of your liberties. And I know for years you have wondered why it is we go to the polls year after year after year. We vote for different people. We keep sometimes people who seem to be doing a good job, but in the end, here we are in our 30s, 40s, 50s, and it hasn't worked yet. What's going wrong? The answer to that is fairly simple. Starting with the time when our fathers came home from the Second World War, the quality of our education was intentionally demoted. And critical pieces of information were left out. Today, there is not a child leaving high school, turning 18 years of age, walking off of that stage with a diploma, understanding that the next morning he is going to take a seat on the board of directors of the biggest corporations in the world, the United States of America and the state of Georgia. Board of directors. It is his duty, her duty, to apprise herself, how is this system functioning? How is this corporation paying dividends to us who are on the board of directors? After all, it's our money that is being invested in this. They don't know. They don't know what to do because they have not been taught. that the ultimate power in this republic today, it may not be this way long. All it's going to take is a constitutional amendment in the state of Georgia, and you can kiss your liberty goodbye, and you can start kissing the fanny of your public servants who will become your masters. Every one of you, please, get your Georgia Constitution. Read it for yourself. Read Article 1, Section 1, Paragraph 11. Read and understand what it means when a criminal trial jury and a grand jury are the only two entities in this nation every constitution, I don't care which one you pick up in Georgia, criminal trial jury, grand juries, judges of the law. There is no greater power. And that power is left in your hands when you are sworn in as a grand juror. Surely there must be some reign on that kind of power. Well, yeah, there is. In the case of U.S. v. Calander, the United States Supreme Court observed that there's one thing the grand jury cannot do. It may not deprive one valid entitlement, one valid right, whether it is established in the Constitution, in the statutes, or in the common law. Other than that, in the proper performance of their duties as prescribed for them in their oath, a grand jury answers to nobody. They do not answer to a district attorney. They do not answer to a governor. They do not answer to the Supreme Court justices, and they do not answer to a Superior Court judge. District attorneys and Superior Court judges, governors, legislators, the Attorney General of the state of Georgia serve the grand jury in this state. This is not true in every state. Georgia is one of two states that I know of. I think there are two more states, but out of the 50, those 4 are the only ones who acknowledge the power of a grand jury. And Ms. Cosby asked me to address this point, and I'm fixing to do so right now. House Bill 941 attempts to modify the code provision which allows a law enforcement officer charged with excessive use of force or charged with any violation of his oath of office to appear before the grand jury. And now they want him to have to give his testimony and be subject to cross-examination. Heretofore, he didn't have to go through cross-examination. He could sit up there and cry and carry on and intimidate with the force of his personality or the sadness of the situation that he's gone through and intimidate a jury into cutting him loose, not presenting him for whatever crime he may have committed. Yes, sir.
Who's going to cross-examine?
Now you see, it's probably going to be the district attorney, and if that's the case, he's, in some cases, I can tell you from personal experience, from personal investigation, there are a lot of corrupt district attorneys in this state.
There's only one side presented in front of the grand jury.
That's correct, it's the prosecution.
Not only that, Judge, if an officer is sitting in there, he can modify his testimony to match what he may hear in the grand jury.
Good point. That's an excellent point, because he has an opportunity to modify and to present facts in a slightly different light than he may have intended to. But I don't wish to get into the technicalities, but here's the problem with that piece of legislation. And there's another statute entitled 45, which allows public officers the same entitlement to go sit and listen to the evidence being presented and then make a statement. Now, both of those are unconstitutional laws. Well, how do you get that? It's simply this. First, equal protection.
That's right.
Public officers and employees are not entitled to protections you, the citizen, are not entitled to. Now, there are court cases that have pretty much settled the attitude of the appellate system in this state about equal protection. And they're taking your equal protection concerns, throwing them in the trash can and saying basically, well, elected public officials have a compelling state's interest in not being unnecessarily tied up with litigation so they can get on with doing the duties of their office. You can decide for yourself whether or not that concern supersedes your equal protection under the law.
So Paul, you're saying
But-
that this bill is going to give extra constitutional rights to police officers?
No, it will not give extra constitutional rights. It's what's called a statutory entitlement. But here's the problem with the whole thing. There are 4 courts in this state. You have the Article 6 court. You have the Article 5 court. You have, which is generally referred to as administrative law courts. You have Article 2 courts, which is the legislative court, court of impeachment. Then you have Article 1 courts. In Article 1 courts, you have a trial jury and you have a grand jury. Guess what? In the other 3 judicial, quote unquote, systems, the state legislature has the authority to exercise legislative discretion to enact laws that it believes are necessary and proper to administer those courts. Guess which court they do not have legislative authority over? Article 1, the grand jury and the trial jury. Those duties, those responsibilities, those processes, procedures, practices and procedures come out of the common law. Thank you.
Okay. We have plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to go back to my statement and say, I said effectively with those police officers. Would that be correct?
I'm sorry.
Would it be correct for me to say effectively they have extra constitutional rights?
Yeah.
They currently have them now.
Okay.
What this law is trying to do, it's sort of a smoke and mirrors piece.
Exactly.
Okay,
What they're
stand
trying
up
to
and
do-
speak louder so everyone can hear.
So, effectively, policemen in this state right now have extra rights that you don't necessarily have. They can sit in the grand jury room the whole time that you're there. They can present evidence to protect themselves. They don't have to be cross-examined. Every piece of evidence that comes into the district attorney's hands goes to them so that they can build a case to protect themselves. You don't have that right. You don't even know if there's a grand jury looking at you. No one tells you that. But police officers and law enforcement officers in the state do know that the grand jury is looking at them, and they have the right to sit in the grand jury room the whole time it's being done. 941 is a smoke and mirrors bill to take some of that away. Not all of it, but some of it, so that the people feel better about these officers that are tossing flashbang grenades into babies' cribs and not getting prosecuted for things. I did say it right the first time. The part about 941 that is scary is the pieces that they're slipping in that talk about giving control to the district attorney about what pieces of evidence can and can't get to the grand jury and can't get into the police officer's hands. And that is effectively trying to legislate a filter onto the grand jury. That's the thing that's scary about 941. 941 should basically say, it should be a one-sentence law that says shiny badges don't grant extra rights. But that's not what they did. That's not what they did. They said, you're right, shiny badges only have a couple of things. But the district attorney can do all this great stuff. And the way that it's phrased is just amazingly slick. Yes. It's scary, you know. Yes.
Ask a question for any of the panelists or anybody that knows. When did we make this turn in the law? When did the police or law enforcement get granted this extra privilege, or has it been there since?
No, it hasn't been there forever.
No, if I remember my reading
Been
correctly,
there for 30 years.
back in the
There when I
90s,
was prosecutor.
Yeah,
80s or 90s.
about 30 years.
About 30 years.
There's a former prosecutor sitting right back here, so.
Okay.
Thank God he's a retired lawyer, so you can expect him to tell you the truth.
941 has another problem too, in that it's being held up as a carrot to the voters, as extra protection for your constitutional rights, when it is in fact just the opposite. But I mean, if you haven't read I'm having a mental problem, senior moment here. Your 1984, then you don't understand that you've been listening to doublespeak pretty much all your damn life. I was born in 1945, and I had the benefit of a couple of years where, you know, you were allowed to draw jet airplanes on your book covers and things like that. Kid can't even point his finger at another kid today. The problem with this country is that the educational system has been hijacked, and it's been hijacked for 100 years.
I've got a question for the judge.
Yes.
Talking about the Article 1, and I don't know that this is true, maybe you do, but I have been told that a grand jury, the right for a grand jury to investigate certain aspects of government finances in Georgia was taken away by a bill not too long ago. Is there any truth to that?
Stand up.
I'm not familiar with precisely what you're speaking of, but let me explain something to you folks. When it comes to your grand jury, you turn over to Title 15 and you will find the grand jury listed, and you will find that there are some codified statutes there. You may read a phrase that says the grand jury shall do this. Anytime you are reading a statute that concerns the grand jury, understand this. The legislature of this state has no authority in Article 1 to create any statute that commands a grand jury or a criminal trial jury to do this, that, or the other. The way you read those statutes so that they make sense with the constitutional requirement is you read them as acknowledging a power of the grand jury. And all of the statutes, by the way, do not acknowledge all of the powers of grand juries. So, grand juries go wherever the facts lead them. If something's brought to their attention and it falls within the requirement of their oath of office, they go wherever it leads them.
And the foreman isn't shot.
Unfortunately,
yeah,
that doesn't happen with our DAs today.
Pardon?
I said, unfortunately, that does not happen with our district attorneys today.
Or our judge.
That's something, folks, you need to understand. You've got to get with we're gonna have to take that one-eyed monster and throw it over in the trash can and start having community meetings and start having, and start going and visiting and talking again like our ancestors did. Because that's the only way we're going to teach one another. You cannot expect your school system to teach a graduating senior that he is about to take a seat at the board of directors of a body corporate and politic.
No, that's more of the Athens to choose women.
The last thing they want is an intelligent electorate.
Well, speaking of smoke and mirrors, it does appear that our government has this kind of repetitive, strategy they're using to progress the agenda, where they always present it as trying to help or protect us, when in actuality what they're doing is taking away our liberty slowly, and they think that we're not noticing. That's my opinion.
You're right, you're absolutely right. And I agree with you on the GMOs and Monsanto. And I'd love to have a speaker tell us how they're destroying our food.
And
Is it-
drugs. And
It's
it's
very-
from the FDA. It's very, very.
We'll talk later. Okay. Ian, you have a question?
Yeah, more or less an observation. And I don't think it's fair to hold our school system entirely responsible, because the main responsibility for teaching our children and our grandchildren fall upon us. And we failed to do it.
Amen.
Explain that to the judge that prosecutes you for homeschooling your children. I've been involved in education, I've been involved with law for all of my life. I taught here at Lanier College. The state of education in this country is horrible.
Okay, we're gonna move on from here, because we all agree how bad education is. So, we're gonna hear from Mike Amee next. Go ahead, Mike.
Again, my name is Mike Amee. I'm a former grand jury foreman for the September 2012 grand jury. Let me give you a little bit of process. So I get a card in the mail that says, "You have been selected." I thought I was going to have to go to the Army board for whatever it was I was selected for. It wasn't until I saw the back that said the grand jury duty. I said, "Great, no problem." I actually wanted to serve on a grand jury, or on a jury, period. I was one of those crazy people, who wants to be on the jury. So I show up, and the term that I was going to initially be selected for, I actually had a vacation plan. So you're sitting in a courtroom with 45 other people, and they start going down a list of names. And if you don't raise your hand or say something and go, "Hey, I would love to serve, but I need to be deferred to the next whatever," they just read your name off. The first 23 get pushed off to the side. The rest of them are, "Thank you for your showing up," and out the door you go. So it's not a really complicated process when you're in the courtroom. Pretty much guaranteed if you're on the top, if your last name is an A, and they read down the list, you're serving. So I got a deferment, showed up for the next, got my card in the mail, showed up again for the September term. I was the first one on the list. I guess they made sure my name was on the list. And we went off to the side. Judge McElgay thanked everybody else for showing up, pushed them out the courtroom, and she proceeded to charge the grand jury. And we took the grand jury's oath, and they handed out this fancy little booklet, that has the Georgia grand jury booklet, which is an interesting read, by the way. And then we proceeded to have elections. We didn't realize you're supposed to have a secretary, you're supposed to have, the foreman. There's a couple of different positions that you elect. We're all standing around looking at each other like, who wants to do that? And it got to be the foreman, and we're all standing around going, who? I finally just like, it can't be that bad. So I raised my hand. I ended up being, that's it. I was the last guy to step backwards, right? I got to be grand jury foreman. They usher us up into the grand jury room, and the district attorney came in, and the district attorney that was our district attorney is now retired. And he proceeded to tell us what our duties were. We spent half the morning doing that. Had a lunch break, came in after lunch, and then they started filing in the ADAs and the policemen. Just boom, 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 boom. And, they handed you the indictment. They read through the indictment. The policeman gave his testimony. The ADA, asked him questions to clarify everything was in the indictment. And then it was, policeman was out of the room, the ADA went out of the room, and we voted true bill or no bill. And it was, you had to have at least 16 of us vote true bill, and it was going to court. Well, I will guarantee you that 99% of the stuff that comes through the grand jury room just comes through the grand jury room is what we call felony stupid. I mean, you're looking at this going, why am I even here? Go away. Some of it, though, you're reading through and you're going, wait a minute, this doesn't, and you're listening to the testimony and you're hearing the questions, and it was myself and there was probably 8 or 10 others in the room. And I won't say there wasn't a little tampering by God to get us all into the one room at the same time, but these things would come through and we would start asking questions of the policeman about probable cause. And why did you do this? Where did you, whatever. And it was amazing to watch. I didn't realize until after, this was going on for a while. The ADAs would stand there and go, well, wait, that's, and they'd start throwing these excuses in the way before you could start actually getting questions answered. And the one that really got us was myself and another grand juror. This policeman was sitting there and he starts going on about how he drove onto this dirt road. And the dirt road was one of those dirt roads that goes down, it splits off into like 6 other driveways. And he got almost all the way down one of the driveways and there was a van parked there. And he stopped his car and got out and he searched the van. And I going off in my head, and the other guy, he's going, he's looking at me, I'm looking at him, and went, wait. So you went down a private dirt road onto a private driveway and opened up someone's vehicle and searched. And yes, you found stolen goods, but you had no probable cause? Did the property owner even ask you to come onto the property was there something suspicious going on? Was there anything? And this guy's like, no, I just took it upon myself to do done the thing. And the ADA goes, well, you guys don't reach the probable cause. You only have to tell us if there's enough evidence for us to prosecute. And if I had known this man, I would have grabbed that guy by the ears and thrown him out of the grand jury room. Because he doesn't have any evidence if the policeman doesn't have probable cause. Bingo! And we were just, and the policeman was sweating about it, you could see the ADA was sweating about it, and it was later that afternoon we got a visit from the DA going, do you guys understand what your job is? Do I need to send you back down to the judge's chamber to get recharged on what you're supposed to do? And, again, it's a learning process, right? So we were threatened with that. Anyway, part of what we were doing, I got a letter in the mail, it was addressed to the grand jury foreman, plain and simple. It was not open, which I will give the retired DA a pat on the back for that, because he didn't open it. He just handed it to me, although he knew who it was from, so he knew what it was about. And he proceeded to fill my ear with about, you're going to hear all kinds of craziness and whatever. Anyway, it was a letter from a Cherokee County resident about the Bobo deal. And we elected to have a special committee put together to go and investigate. And we had a real estate banker, a loan officer on the thing. We had a guy that did forensic audits on the thing. We had a couple of guys that were just plain ticked off on the thing. And, myself as the foreman. And we went off and we started doing our things. And some of these guys, unfortunately, I have to work for a living, but some of these guys had their own business and they could take their own time and, rearrange their schedule. They were up at the courthouse, getting papers, doing research, doing work, and it was amazing to us that, for example, they couldn't figure out what the tax value on the property was that Bobo bought and then sold to the county. So they didn't know how much of what they paid was to pay the tax bill. They didn't know how much it was. Well, the real estate loan officer went to the thing. He went to the county tax record. He went and said, here's the plot, give me the thing, and here's the tax record. Right down the road. 35 minutes he had it figured out. And here it is, we've got courthouse full of district attorney lawyers and ADAs and all these folks can't figure this stuff out.
Well, let me clarify that again. When you say ADA, you mean
Assistant district attorneys. And
And
all
you're
of their
saying
investigators.
that they couldn't go to the courthouse. When you use the word they, that's who you mean that couldn't go and find out that very simple information.
I say they couldn't go,
They wouldn't.
and I didn't say they wouldn't go,
They didn't.
but they didn't go. I mean, because if someone can go and figure it, it probably would have taken me 2 hours. And it took our friend 30 minutes because he's in the business. Well, it's all there. It's all public documents. You all can go do it. It's that easy. Anyway, so we started gathering all of this stuff, and we're going, this just smells really bad. And I don't mean because they're doing with mulch and all that nasty stuff. This just smells bad. So we started talking and said, hey, we want to bring these people in and start asking some questions. We wanted to start doing some investigation. And we were advised by the district attorney to not put anybody under oath. He says, you'll get more flies with honey than you will whatever. I'm thinking, well, okay, because we're just trying to get answers to questions that they supposedly already answered, but we want to see if there's more detail. So we did that. And then I wasn't there for one of the investigations, and one of the grand jurors was there, and he started to really grill into one of our elected officials, who was no longer an elected official, but he was having fun with him anyway. And one of the ADAs, who is now our DA, turned and looked at this man and said, if you don't stop being belligerent, I will have you removed from the grand jury. There's no section in the law that says they can do that, unless there's maybe a moral turpitude clause, then we'll probably half of this get thrown out, but, you know. Yeah.
Now, do grand juries have bailiffs?
Yes, they do. And yes, I could have said to bailiff, get this woman out of my grand jury room.
Because if I was there, I would have.
But the thing is, I didn't know this man at the time.
Oh, okay.
So I thought the problem is, a lot of us have that feeling that something isn't right. And a lot of us have done a lot of reading. And we've got really good ideas, but we haven't put it all together yet.
We don't know our rights.
Right.
We haven't put it
Or
together
we
yet.
know
We're
what
doing it.
some of our rights are, but we don't know how to enforce them. Or we don't know how to exercise them. And in the case of a grand jury, of course, you're in a courtroom and you've got to.
Okay,
Keep
Bob, I'm
going.
going to yield some of my time for this.
So
Stop.
here you are, and let's face it, you go into a courtroom for a traffic ticket and you feel intimidated because here's this person sitting, 5, 6, 7 feet above you. They're dressed in a black dress. I won't call her, but it's a black dress. They got this stern face and a hammer, right? And I'm afraid they're going to come down and hit me with the hammer, but that's the way it goes. So there's all this intimidation that goes on. When you're on a grand jury, you don't understand that you're actually standing above that person. You're the one that goes to that person and says, I need this, I need that, I need the other. The only indication that you have any kind of power or things that are going on are the bailiffs. When you talk to the bailiffs, if you say, I need, the bailiffs are off after, period. I don't care what it is. You want coffee, fresh coffee, and they just made a pot, they'll make you another pot. You need something copied, you need this looked up in the thing, you need that looked up in the thing. The bailiffs will go and they will get it done for you because they work for you. Yes, sir?
Yeah, could a grand jury, and specifically grand jury foreman, have a bailiff or declare like a district attorney or whatever in contempt of that court and have them put in?
Well,
arbitration?
that's an interesting thing. See, when that one ADA told this guy that she was going to have him removed, that's an attempt to intimidate a grand jury member.
That's what I'm asking.
That's a crime. And he should have come back to me, and if I had known at the time, we could have written up an indictment, voted on it, sent it to the judge to be signed, and that ADA would be under indictment. for attempting to intimidate or influence a grand jury. Yes, sir.
How many of you guys have been invited back to the grand jury? Zero.
Oh, yeah, I've probably got so much red ink around my name, it's not funny. Because we kept pushing. And they probably had to work harder in that 4-month period to keep the status quo than they had to work in a long time. Yeah, I'm sure if you pull up my name on the grand jury rolls right now, there's probably an, oh, hell no. But that's what I would like to get to, my point is we need a few things. One, we need education. We need education on what our rights are. We need education on how to make it work, how to operate inside a grand jury room, how to handle a district attorney that's being overly aggressive, how to handle these kinds of things. And then we need to be able to do. And we also need to be able to, as citizens, understand how to get in front of a grand jury, how to explain your evidence in case a crime is being committed, how to move a grand jury to actually indict on those kinds of things. And that's a whole educational process. There's the grand jury side when you're on the grand jury, being able to get outside of the DA's box and actually go and get to those things that are under your purview. And then there's the public side where the people can actually get to their court and move their court to actually indict people that are breaking the law. Here's a novel idea, medical marijuana. Okay? I'm not for smoking dope as a pastime because you're bored and you want to get hungry and eat pizza. There's absolutely no need for that in this country. But they've proven time and time again that medical cannabis cures everything from epilepsy and autism to cancer. But yet our governor has decided through his proxies in the legislature that he doesn't want to grow medical marijuana in this state. How about the first time a child dies in this state because they can't get medical marijuana to treat whatever blank illness is, a grand jury brings the governor up on manslaughter charges because he wouldn't sign a bill to get in front. Now, I don't know if that's possible, but I'll tell you what, you'll get somebody's attention if he gets dragged into court on a manslaughter charge.
You can take all the grand jury formed in the state of Georgia together, they don't have the stones to do that.
That's why I'll have to get back into the grand jury.
It would not be just the governor, it would be the majority of the legislators who voted down the bill. So
Every
we
one
have
of the lobbyists that didn't support the bill in the first place. I mean, you could have an indictment this freaking long. Now, granted, it may go nowhere, but the fact that, can you imagine the headline, Cherokee County grand jury indicts the governor, the legislature, you know, this.
I think it would make national news.
Yeah. Suddenly, someone's going to have, first off, there'll be a whole lot of puckering going on, and probably a whole lot of toilet paper sold. Secondly, people are going to start thinking, going, wait a minute, how can a grand jury indict the governor? Or
Article 1, I'm sorry,
Go.
Article 2. Y'all,
Anyway,
y'all forgive me.
this is what I'm talking about. It's an educational process. Yes, ma'am.
When you put this into the context of the American Medical Association being founded by Rockefeller money with the distinct purpose of squelching natural remedies, and the fact that the doctors come out of medical school now have absolutely no nutrition taught to them, you will understand why the U.S. is the sickest country in the world. And you'll understand why there are 300 to 400 pound people walking around in this world who are basically malnourished. And when the body's malnourished, it malfunctions.
Ma'am,
Here, here. And that could be a subject of grand jury.
ma'am, may I ask you a question with your medical training? Are you familiar with Amerisol?
Marisol, yes, sir. I've been to marches at the Center for Disease Control as of last January. I'm very familiar with that.
Can I see you after this?
Absolutely.
So, and you know what? Let's just say that reaching for the governor might be a little high, but how about the next time a police officer, and I know there's police officers out there that do their jobs, but there are some people out there that are so overzealous about what they do. Pardon?
Idiots.
Okay, idiots. I was trying to be politically correct, but the idiots out there. How about the next time one of them oversteps their bounds and they start operating underneath the color of law, which is where it looks like they're enforcing the law, but they're really not. In a case of that is a false arrest. Did you know a false arrest is an assault?
Yeah.
It's an assault. So how about you get your evidence together and get in front of a grand jury and you get an indictment against this police officer for assault, a criminal charge, and you go down that path. You're going to start waking people up to what their power is. Yes, sir.
Yeah, when you're charged as a grand jury, is it from a certain time to a certain time?
Yes. The grand jury's lifespan is 4 months, unless it's a special grand jury. Let's say a judge asks for, or an elected official of the state asks for a special grand jury to investigate a certain thing. That grand jury is in power for as long as it takes to investigate what it is.
Well, then can you investigate whatever you want during that 4 months, or do you have a specific task or agenda that you're given?
Just stay standing.
If you will read the oath of a grand juror, they are charged by that oath to diligently inquire and true presentment make of all matters touching upon their present service. It does not matter how they hear of something that falls within that ambit. And a grand jury has a normal business cycle. One term of court to the next term of court. Whether that term be 3 months, 4 months, 2 months in the case of Cobb County, 6 months in the case of Lawrence County, for example. However, if a grand jury starts its own investigation, here's something else you need to understand. There are 2 types of grand jury inquests. One is initiated by a district attorney where all of the evidence is already accumulated. The other is one started by the grand jury itself. That's when they have the power and the duty to tell the district attorney, you need to go back to your office and prop your feet up, we'll call you if we need you. Now, I know that sounds a little funny, but I'm serious. That's the way. A grand jury would not dare talk to a district attorney that way because they are a proper group of judges. But you rest assured, that's the way the district attorney will hear
It's
it.
your turn. Sorry, I used to.
I'm sorry.
No, I think everybody is very enraptured by this. Do you have a few more things to say?
Just a couple. I mean,
Okay, go ahead.
So to back to it, the grand jury, as it was paneled when I was on it, was 4 months, 2 days a month. And the district attorney basically had everything lined up for us when we came in. From 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., it was case. We did see our special investigative group, and they could come and go whenever they wanted. And they got paid, actually, for every day that they did their investigations. They put in a timesheet, the whole bit. What I didn't realize is at the time is as the grand jury foreman, I could have ordered every grand jury person in that room, everybody that was seated on the room, to show up every day, 7 days a week if I wanted to, for the full term or longer if we were in the middle of an investigation.
Should have.
I didn't know. And that's where I'm getting to education. We have to put together the guidelines on, if you make it to a grand jury, this is what you can do. If anybody in this room gets called and they get into the grand jury, first thing I would do is, if a DA or a judge gets a whiff of any idea that you have a half a brain in your head, You will not be on the top 23, I will guarantee. You won't. If they have half a width of what's going on, you'll be out. Second, if you get in that room and you get impaneled and they start talking about officers, when it comes time to be the foreman of that grand jury, you better be in a fist fight to get yourself to be a foreman. Because the foreman is basically the Supreme Court judge of that grand jury room. You control everything.
Chief Justice.
Chief Justice, thank you. You control everything that goes on in that room. And as the grand jury foreman,
With the advice and consent, most times.
most times. Yes, sir.
Who do you think is gonna do this educating? Certainly not the government.
Oh,
That's the job of all of us here, is
That's
to learn.
right.
I mean, if
It's
you
our
walk up to that
goal.
courthouse with a jury information package, you're gonna get arrested.
You don't have to go to the courthouse. You don't have to go to the courthouse. We put together a guideline, and you get on a mailing list like this one, or you get on Facebook, and you start putting posts, hey, you guys interested in, anybody been called? Hey, put a link out to a document somewhere, let them go, did you know this? I didn't know this. And you play stupid, and you post this stuff, I'm sorry, you know, I know it's funny, but you play stupid going, hey, I didn't know this was available, did you know this was available? And you post a link to it. Or you tweet it? Is that what it is? Tweet? I'm sorry, I can't do Twitter. I can't do Twitter because the first 5 letters of that word is twit. I've already got a reputation. I don't need to be known as a twit. So, guess what?
That's the goal of the Tea Party, is to run
Right.
a series of educational from here.
And the thing is,
Okay,
you'll
so we
get
have more
pushback.
questions. Yes, we'll get it.
You'll get pushback, and they'll say, no, 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 that's not true. And that's where you need to be able to have a resource that you can go back and say, well, yes, it is, because this does not overwrite the Constitution. Yes, sir.
How many of you up there are part of the Fully Informed Jury Association, PJA? The national organization, we do have a representative here in the state.
I have not, didn't know about it.
If you guys, there is an organization out there trying to educate people on juries, and we are trying to start a chapter here in Georgia, getting judges, attorneys.
Which is a great idea.
Fully Informed Jury Association out of Colorado. Yeah, I'm familiar with them. Good bunch of them.
It's a good bunch, but you
We're
have to
familiar
remember.
with that, and we were going to use some of their resources. So you have to stay after class too.
The thing to remember is every state is different. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir?
I've been on the grand jury too. Everything you have said is spot on. I was in a quarterback in 2005, 6, 7, I don't know what it is. Anyway, from your experience, just reckon that came back to me with what I had to go through in the grand jury that I was on. They would bring in a case. The ADA would come in there, arresting officer comes down, sits, and there was a little young lady, and she's an arresting officer. Okay, now we have a drug case, and the ADA would go like this. Okay, on the night of so-and-so, Mr. So, you saw him do what? And she'd go look at and the ADA goes this, you saw him pick up the package, and you thought there was something wrong, right? And she, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, this is going on. Yeah.
We won't lead witnesses here, okay?
Okay, and then what'd you do? You went over there and talked to him, and looked down in the bag, see some kind of drug, right? Yeah, that's what it did. That's what it went through, case after case after case, same arresting officer. Finally, I went to the foreman and said, hey, something's fishy here. Is this right? And he said, I said, I'm gonna ask. So he, during a break, went and talked to the ADAs, there was a gang on there, and he came back and says, well, since they're using the same arresting officers, because it's the undercover multitask drug force in Cherokee County area like that, they're undercover, so therefore they're just gonna have one do all cases. That was the reason we got it. Wait, that's still ain't. But we had to go through it, like he says. We had to take that. They did not tell us our full right as being on the grand jury. We didn't just here, this is what you gotta do it, and everything will be all right. And you're supposed to be here at 5. If you
knock these three, you get out of here Tuesday afternoon. Basically, that's what we
Right, right. You know, it was an interesting experience that if I ever had a chance to do it again, I said if, and it's a big if, it would be, well, let's just say there'd probably be lots of red and blue flashing lights around the courthouse because they'd be trying to get me out of it. Education, and curiosity, and then passing it on, and using these grassroots organizations and the social media that's there. I don't think, and I'm going to use this term, I don't think the establishment realizes the Pandora's box that they opened when they let DARPANet out to the public. And people could start sharing information without somebody actually getting in the way and saying, oh wait, you can't see that. It's a genie that they're trying to put back in the bottle, and we're going to have a real hard time doing it because there's so much available information out there. But the thing is, you have to verify. You have to trust but verify. Verify, verify, verify. Because there is a lot of crap out there too. Excuse my language. Yeah. There is a ton of garbage and patriot mythology garbage that's out there, and you know, just stuff that it may all be true, but you don't have to go there. All you have to do is say, no, you're infringing on my rights, and I'm gonna stop now. And it's all in education, and it's all good people in Carolyn. Yes,
You
sir.
have a question?
I have a question, and it relates to a particular event that has just recently happened. To the best of my knowledge, a grand jury, this was a federal grand jury, was investigating a former congressman about something that happened in an election. And it drug on for about 9 months. And to the best of my knowledge, at the end of the grand jury, they did not issue a no bill or a true bill. Now, can that happen?
Sure can. The grand jury can just kind of drop it and no bill at all. But the thing is, like here in Georgia, if something goes before a grand jury, and you get 2 bites at the apple in Georgia, in front of the grand jury. If that happens, say, in Georgia, and no bill was issued, true or otherwise, that person would have a chance to go to another grand jury and get that reinvestigated again. And they could do that time and time again until they got 2 no bills out of grand jury. Now, federal, I don't know. But the beauty of it is, if it's a federal crime, but it's a theft by taking that's affecting people in Cherokee County, you could go to the Cherokee County grand jury and say, I've got evidence of a crime. And the Cherokee County grand jury, because it's come under it affects one of the county residents, and it's theft by taking, they can investigate all they want. It doesn't have to be a federal crime.
With the statement you made a while ago about going after the governor, why do we not try to work some kind of a situation where we go after, you pick the congressman, I don't know which one it is, and you go after them for violating their oath of office?
Well, there's a
So now you're getting into my territory, the Constitution part, okay? You're talking politics now.
There's a few reasons, well, in politics beside, there's a few reasons that hasn't happened. One is education. People don't realize that they can do that. 2 is money. It will take money. Now, the grand jury doesn't need money. The grand jury says, well, this is what we're going to investigate. And guess what? Cherokee County has to pay for it. But if it goes to court, then the person that brought that indictment brought the evidence to the grand jury is going to be involved in its money. And 3, chutzpah. I mean, you know, it's going to take
Courage,
Yes.
courage.
to stand up. And we have a woman that's dealing with courage now.
Well, she's got it.
Yeah.
Oh, no, but I mean, that's the whole, you know, she's going through this process. And anybody that doesn't understand how nasty and dirty it can get just needs to talk to Carol.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I keep speaking up.
No, please.
I think Cynthia McKinney found out what happens when you stand up to Donald Rumsfeld.
Oh, yeah, she got investigated by the IRS and
Yeah.
she got.
Yeah, and then she got run out and got her seat taken over by a gentleman who thinks Guam's gonna sink if we extend the military base. So that's what happened.
And that's probably the most educated state I've already made. The other piece of this is you need to read and understand. There's an important word that I've learned. I've known about it for a while because my father was one of these guys that always liked to cause trouble. And he got me thinking. And one of the things you need to understand and you need to learn about is jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is a very important word. And jurisdiction goes to definitions. When you read the law, or you read statutes and codes, it's more important. But when you read statutes and codes, there's usually a section in there that's called definitions. And you need to go and understand what the definition of the terms are that these people are using in court. Because the terms that they're using, if they've been defined in the code, don't necessarily mean what you think they mean.
That's true. Very important to know.
The terms in the law, a term is a word that has a very specific definition made specifically for the law that it's quoted in. So you may say apple is an apple, but in the law, apple may be defined as any fruit with a yellow skin that you peel. And you think I'm joking, but that is exactly the case. The other, you know, and I could go down this path because I've been reading now for 12 years.
You're taking some of my time.
Yeah.
I took all your time. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm done.
It's almost 8:45. So is there any other quick questions? I hate silencing the crowd, but we've had a terrific evening.
I apologize. I should have been last.
Ricardo yielded his time, but I'm going to give you 3 minutes to say whatever you want to say, brother.
Okay.
So,
Well, I tell you what. First of all, are judges in Georgia appointed or elected? If they're appointed, if you think they're appointed, raise your hand.
both.
Okay, hold on a second. If you think they're elected, raise your hand.
Yes.
Okay, if you think they're both, raise your hand. They're all elected. All the way up to the state Supreme Court, they are elected. Every one of them. Now, and as a matter of fact, a certain Judge Cannon, I believe, will be up for re-election this year.
Not qualified yet, though.
Well, I'll put it like this. Yeah, if he runs, he will be the incumbent. One end of this is when the grand jury is impaneled and the elected officers sworn to uphold justice in this county do not uphold their oath to the state constitution and the federal. Then one recourse that we have as citizens in this county is to get educated on what they are doing, what they believe their job is. And if they swear to uphold the law and we get word that they're not upholding their end of the deal, then it is our duty to replace them. So along with that education about what we are supposed to do as jurors, whether on a trial or a grand jury, we need to understand what the judge's responsibilities are. And we need to understand how to judge whether or not they are being effective in their positions. Now, question, since the governor was brought up a minute ago.
Sorry,
Yes, well, you know he is sorry, so I'm just going to put it out there. Okay, our governor has essentially said that your First Amendment right to the free exercise of religion is subsidiary to the corporate establishment in this state. He basically said, if House Bill 757 hits my desk, I'm going to veto it. Okay? Now, in Alabama, they don't have a governor that stopped them. Essentially, their judges, their state Supreme Court, just exercised some interposition. This is the story that nobody, how many of y'all have heard that the Supreme Court of Alabama essentially nullified the Obergefell decision last Friday?
One person.
Yeah, well, two. There was another guy over there that heard about it. In the state of Alabama, the state Supreme Court essentially said that even though we basically did an administrative order saying, no, you will not issue a marriage license to 2 men or 2 women until we can go through the matter, and some of them continue to do it anyway. Well, the case is now closed, the opinion, and if you look up Alabama Supreme Court ruling and read it, it will bless your socks off. Because these men, in particular Roy Moore and Tom Parker, they did their duty to interpose between a lawless federal court and uphold the law in the state of Alabama. And these guys are elected. What we need to do, in other words, every time somebody says, well, we need to elect a president so we can nominate a Supreme Court justice, I'm like, stop. Okay. After I finish the sentence.
Yes.
You can elect your own state Supreme Court justices that will uphold the Constitution. So we're going to work together. I think, Carolyn, you got a little synergy happening here,
yes,
where the people are becoming fully informed not only of their rights and duties as jurors, but now how to hold high the standard of accountability to those judges that we elect to office, and to demand that they, what's the Alabama state model, that they dare defend our rights. Thank you. Oh, and Jim, pass them out, brother. They're done. Oh, they're done? Excellent. Look it up. Thank you.
I think you will agree that we have had an outstanding